Eugène Delacroix, born April 26, 1798, Charenton-Saint-Maurice, France, died August 13, 1863, Paris, was one of the greatest French Romantic painters. His skill as a colorist influenced the development of both Impressionist and Post-Impressionist painting. His inspiration was drawn mainly from historical and contemporary events, literature, and a trip to Morocco in 1832 gave him new subjects for his work. Delacroix was the fourth child in the family. His mother was Victoria Eben of the Eben-Riesener family, who made furniture for the French king and court in the 17th and 18th centuries. His father was Charles Delacroix, a government official who was ambassador to Holland in 1798 and died in 1805 while prefect of Bordeaux. One theory attributes Eugène's true paternity to the statesman Charles-Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord. This belief is supported both by Delacroix's strong physical resemblance to Talleyrand and by the fact that the future artist consistently received important patronage from the French government, despite the nature of his art. Whatever the true circumstances of his origins, Delacroix's childhood was serene, and he always retained a great affection for and admiration for his father. Until the age of 17, he studied classical literature and developed a passion for music and theater. In 1815, he became a pupil of the famous academic painter Pierre Narcisse Baron Guérin. A child of his age, Delacroix was influenced by the painter Théodore Géricault, Richard Park Bonington, the composer and pianist Frédéric Chopin, and the writer Georges Sand. Delacroix's debut at the Paris Salon of 1822, where he presented his first masterpiece, Dante and Virgil in Hell, is one of the milestones in the development of French Romantic painting in the 19th century. The artist was inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy and Géricault's painting The Raft of Medusa. The tragedy of the scene and the powerful sculpting of the figures recall Michelangelo, while the rich coloring shows the influence of Peter Paul Rubens. Among Delacroix's contemporaries, an important role was played by Théodore Géricault, who was his best friend until his sudden death in 1824. In 1824, Delacroix exhibited at the Paris Salon the painting The Massacre at Chios, a large canvas depicting the dramatic massacre of Greeks by the Turks on the island of Chios. The nature of his talent is evident in the unity he achieved in expressing the arrogant pride of the conquerors, the horror and despair of the Greeks, and the splendor of the vast sky. In the foreground of Delacroix's canvas, we see a group of distraught Greek men, women, and children who, huddled together, some dead, others barely alive, lie on the ground. On the left, a man is dying from a stomach wound, and his wife is leaning on his shoulder. On the right, a dead mother leans against an elderly woman, while her child tries unsuccessfully to suckle her naked breast. Behind them on the right, an Ottoman Turk drags a naked captive behind him, while some woman tries in vain to stop him by raising her hands. In the background, less distinct figures fight against a devastated landscape. The large scale of the canvas gives monumentality to the suffering of the Greek figures and enhances the overall drama and visual impact of the painting. The painting was painted under the impression of the events of the Greek War of Independence in 1822, during which the Turkish troops invaded the island of Chios and killed thousands of rebellious Greeks. Delacroix departed from the tradition of classical narrative painting, which was dominated by order, regularity, and a sense of control. Rather, this work represents a new approach to historical drama. First, it is based on real and recent events rather than on remote episodes from ancient history or mythology. Delacroix brings the viewer closer to the action, and more specifically to the suffering of the victims. We exist on the same level as they do, thus inspiring empathy and emotional unity. Finally, instead of showing the climax of the battle, he shows us its aftermath, using rich colors and a complex compositional structure with different groupings of figures in the foreground and background. To complete his technical and cultural education, Delacroix went to London in 1825. There, his technique, developed through contacts with Turner Constable and Sir Thomas Lawrence, acquired the freedom and flexibility he had hitherto admired in Rubens and sought for himself. Between 1827 and 1832, Delacroix produced masterpieces in rapid succession. Chief among them is The Death of Sardanapalus, 1826–27, a violent and voluptuous Byronic subject in which women, enslaved people, animals, jewels, and rich fabrics are combined in a sensuous but somewhat incoherent scene. This huge painting depicts another dramatic historical event, the last moments of the Assyrian king Sardanapalus, who ordered the destruction of all his possessions, including his harem, during the siege of his palace. He preferred to die rather than be defeated, and the moment Delacroix chose to depict was just before his suicide, an act more extravagant than heroic. The painting shows the king, dressed in white, lying on a large bed with a red drapery, watching the chaos around him. One slave girl has collapsed on the bed beside the king, while another awaits her death at the hands of his male servant in the foreground. The horse rears in fear, the slave barely restraining it. The king's chamber is strewn with riches, including gold pieces, jewels, and luxurious fabrics, which will soon be burnt in the flames of the funeral pyre. The story of Sardanapalus was popular with the Romantics. The artist heightened the drama inherent in the scene through his composition. The overall effect is chaos, but of a very special kind, marked by decadence. This painting exemplifies the dramatic flair that Delacroix brought to his work. The painting demonstrates Delacroix's mastery of color, and in particular his use of red, which both symbolizes decadence and luxury, but also, of course, blood and wounds. One of Delacroix's best paintings on historical subjects is the execution of the Doge Marino Faliero, as are two works on medieval history, The Death of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, January 5, 1477–1831, and The Battle of Poitiers, 1830. He also painted a typically Byronic battle theme between a giaour and a pasha, 1835. Like Géricault, Delacroix explored the newly invented method of lithography and made a set of 17 lithographs, 1827, illustrating the French edition of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust. In 1830, Delacroix painted Liberty Leading the People, commemorating the July Revolution that had just brought Louis-Philippe to the French throne. This large canvas combines allegory with modern realism in a very successful and monumental manner, and is still perhaps the most popular of all Delacroix's paintings. The painting depicts people of different ages running across a canvas strewn with dead bodies. In the center stands a bare-chested woman holding a rifle in her left hand and a French flag in her right and looking away. To her right are two men. One in a white shirt waving a saber runs alongside a formally dressed man in a black jacket, tie and cylinder holding a musket. To the left of the woman is a boy waving two pistols. Smoke and devastation can be seen in the background, as well as the barely discernible outlines of Paris. The painting is rich in symbolism. The unity of classes is represented by the presence of a bourgeois gentleman fighting alongside members of the lower classes. The national colors of France, blue, white, and red, are repeated throughout the composition. The woman serves as an allegory of the concept of liberty and, by extension, of the French Republic itself. Delacroix shows her as a warrior ready to fight. She literally rushes forward, leading the people. The power of this work lies in its ability to convey both the patriotic spirit of the event and its chaotic, violent reality. Interestingly, Delacroix's depiction of liberty became a major symbol of republicanism in France, taking its place on both the national currency and postage stamps, and cementing its place in the legacy of France's greatest artists. From January to July 1832, Delacroix traveled to Algeria, Spain, and Morocco. Morocco was a revelation for Delacroix, who found in its people and way of life a Homeric nobility and beauty that he had never seen in French academic neoclassicism per se. Views of lush nature and the beauty of horses, Arabs and their clothing would henceforth inspire his visual memory even in his last works. Delacroix made many sketches and notes during his travels and used them successfully on his return to Paris. After Morocco, his drawing and handling of paint became even freer and his use of color even more luxurious. The first fruits of his Moroccan impressions are gathered in the painting Women of Algeria in Their Apartment, 1834, in which 3 Arab women and their surroundings are depicted in the glow of exquisitely warm color harmonies. 3 Algerian women in brightly colored clothes sit casually on the floor in an ornate interior. The subject of this work was Delacroix's visit to the home of a Muslim man and former pirate who had a separate apartment for his harem or the women of his family. Although there is some ambiguity surrounding this visit, we know that Delacroix was fascinated by what he saw and described the experience as inducing a fever that could barely be contained by sherbet and fruit. Delacroix's painting is based on drawings and watercolor sketches of women that he made. The richness of detail in the painting is a result of both his attention to detail as an observer and his creativity in creating scenes of romantic exoticism. Delacroix once stated that the chief virtue of painting is to please the eye, which he demonstrates with this painting, providing an excellent example of his mastery of his use of colors, conveying the mysticism of the Orient that so intrigued the French public of the time. Cézanne once remarked, "Delacroix had the best color palette in France." Delacroix's other works of his North African impressions include The Convulsionists of Tangier, 1837-38, and A Jewish Wedding in Morocco, 1839. He continued to paint pictures on Arab themes almost to the end of his life. At the end of his career, Delacroix received a number of important commissions for the decoration of government buildings. His first commission in 1833 to 1836 was to paint a group of frescoes for the royal salon in the Bourbon Palace. He was subsequently commissioned to decorate the ceiling of the Library of the Bourbon Palace, 1838-47, the Library of the Luxembourg Palace, 1840-47, the ceiling of the Apollo Gallery at the Louvre, 1850, and the Salon de la Paix at the Hôtel de Ville, 1849-53. His frescoes represent the last major work of their kind in the tradition of Baroque ceiling painters. During this period, Delacroix also painted some of the largest canvases of his career, notably 2 for the Historical Museum at Versailles, the Battle of Taillebourg, 1837, and the entry of the Crusaders into Constantinople, 1840. In the last years of his career, Delacroix turned more and more to nature for inspiration. Unlike traditional still lifes, which are usually arranged on tables indoors, here the setting is a lush, open garden with green shrubs and trees. The painting depicts a straw basket turned sideways with a multitude of red, yellow, pink, and orange flowers falling out of it. The basket is directly under a flowering vine that grows on the left side of the canvas and stretches to the right across the width of the painting, forming a sort of archway of the foreground. The red flowering bush on the left is matched by the bright colors of another bush in the right middle ground, as well as the flowers in the center. Indeed, the emphasis on color and composition creates the overall impression of harmony that later Impressionists sought to create in their own outdoor scenes. Among his later easel paintings are paintings of Arabic, religious, and classical subjects, as well as several magnificent scenes of wild animals and hunting, including The Lion Hunt, 1861. This tense and somewhat chaotic scene depicts a group of Arabs leading an attack on 2 lions. On the left, a lioness knocks down a rider and his horse, while another figure attempts to pierce her with a spear from behind. In the background, at the top of a loosely constructed pyramidal composition, another hunter gallops toward the battle site with his sword raised. In the foreground, center, and right, we see 4 other men trying to kill a male lion that has trapped one of the hunters in its huge paws. This painting is part of Delacroix's series of works on the theme of lion hunting and is considered one of his last large-scale masterpieces. The painting highlights the artist's interest in the dynamic arrangement of figures and experimenting with them to achieve dramatic effect, which he explored throughout his career. It also demonstrates the artist's fascination with animals, which he studied intensely. His drawing albums were full of graphite drawings of both domestic cats and wild ones, including lions, some of which he made in the zoo at the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. Indeed, Delacroix was a great admirer of animals and wrote in his diary that he was fascinated by the fact that the front paw of the lion resembled the monstrous hand of man. During his long career, Delacroix painted several notable self-portraits and occasionally produced portraits of friends such as Chopin and Sand, both in 1838. Delacroix died in 1863, leaving behind more than 6,000 drawings, watercolors, and prints that have been offered for sale. His diaries are among the most substantial since Leonardo da Vinci. Along with Turner, Delacroix was a forerunner of bold technical innovations that strongly influenced the development of Impressionism and subsequent modernist movements. The liberated expression of energy and movement in his work, his fascination with violence, destruction, and the most tragic aspects of life, and the sensual virtuosity of his coloring helped him become one of the most fascinating and complex artistic figures of the 19th century. If the video was interesting to you, please give it a like or comment. I am interested to know your opinion.